Here's where we are in the governance series. Phase 1, seeing the system, letters 1 to 12, that is complete. Phase 2, designing the system, composed of letters 13 to 30, there are multiple stages. Stage 1, entering design letters 13A and 13B. That is complete. Stage 2, stabilizing the core, letters 14 to 17. We are now in letter 14, where design begins decision ownership. Think back to a meeting where a decision needed to be made. Everyone around the table had their respective personal view. Some had authority or believed they did. The conversation moved forward, then circled back, then moved forward again. Eventually, something was agreed, or something was assumed to be agreed. And then, weeks later, it became clear that no one had actually decided anything. The decision had been discussed, it had not been actually made. The room felt engaged. Multiple perspectives were present. The conversation was substantive. What was missing was invisible. One designated person named with the explicit authority over this decision and the accountability, the owner for what follows. The first 12 letters of this series guided us through something that does not always announce itself. The organizational patterns that shape how decisions are made, how authority flows, and how governance holds or does not hold. We saw how some of those patterns had been present for years. Others had grown quietly in the space between what the organization intended and what it actually did. That seeing was essential. This letter introduces a shift in the series. Not every organizational condition is addressed by a business tool or a technical intervention. There's always a human element. The human element is not a variable to be managed. It responds to something different than a diagnosis. It is the environment in which every decision, every authority structure, and every governance design either takes root or does not. The orientation that serves this work and every letter that follows is one that has been studied and applied in organizational psychology and communication design for decades. It is called appreciative inquiry. Technical leaders will recognize a familiar instinct in this approach. In a complex system, you identify what is functioning before you diagnose what is not. What is functioning defines the boundaries of the actual condition. It tells you where the design gap begins. Appreciative inquiry applies that same discipline to organizations. Begin with what is working. Design from there. Instead of naming the gap, we name the possibility. Instead of diagnosing a condition, we describe the design that makes the condition unnecessary. This does not dismiss the reality of what organizations experience. Every leader reading this series already knows what the conditions feel like. Appreciative inquiry is not a soft approach. It is a precise one. It does not deny what is present. It simply refuses to make what is present the center of gravity. And in doing so, it creates the conditions in which genuine change becomes possible. What this series offers is the orientation that allows you to move through what you are experiencing rather than spiraling inside it. A governance condition is not a verdict on an organization. It is a description of where the design has not yet caught up with the intention. The intention is almost always present. Leaders want decisions to be made, authority to be clear, governance to function. The design is what makes that intention operational. This series is about the design. It is the gap between what the organization says it is and what it actually does. Not as a failure, not as a dysfunction. For example, the gap between the title on the door and the function in the chair. Between the governance on paper and governance in practice. Every pattern in this series is a place where the stated reality and the lived reality have separated. When that gap opens, organizations stop acting on their decisions and start debating who is responsible for making them. The resolution names are not fixes. They are designs that bring what the organization does into agreement with what it says it is. These are not failures. They are conditions. And every condition in this series has a design response. A resolution, a way of building something that holds. The shift being invited here is not a change in your organization. It is a change in how you see it. Not what is wrong, but what is possible. Not where the design has fallen short, but where it has not yet been completed. Diffused ownership was introduced in letter 1 of this series, where we named the pattern and what it costs an organization. What follows here is the design response, not what the condition is, but what resolves it. We define diffused ownership as a design condition, specifically the absence of one designated person who holds a specific decision and is accountable or owner of the outcome. When ownership is diffused, it belongs to everyone in the room and to no one who can be held accountable. When that designated or named person is absent, the organization produces the appearance of decision making without the substance of it. Accountability distributes across everyone and lands on no one. When the outcome is questioned, each party can point to the system. The meeting was held, the inputs were gathered, consensus was sought, and none of that explains why the decision never held. The pattern appears at every level. A model governance policy is reviewed by legal, risk, technology, and the business unit. Each team engages genuinely. Each has a position. And yet, without a designated decision owner, the conversation cannot close. Not because the people are unwilling, but because the design does not give anyone the standing to finalize it. The policy moves through multiple rounds of interview. It is never finalized, or it is finalized without the genuine agreement of the functions that did not see their position reflected. And so it is never followed. An AI deployment decision involves data science, product operations, and compliance. The meeting concludes with action items distributed across 4 teams. 6 weeks later, the deployment has been paused by one team that did not believe the decision was final. From their vantage point, it was not. No one had been designated or named to make it. When decisions do not hold consistently, organizations adapt. Informal channels emerge, smaller rooms make faster calls. This is not a character observation. It is a rational response to a system that has not yet been designed to support the decisions it is asking people to make. The governance structure remains a shell, present from the outside, but empty in the center, and stops functioning as a mechanism. Organizations that address this design condition reduce decision reversals, the single most consistent source of AI implementation delay, and free their leaders to move forward rather than return to ground already covered. The design response, the resolution, is called designated decision owner. Designated names a person, not a team, not a committee, not a role that rotates. Decision names what they own, not a function, not a department, not a general area of responsibility. Owner names the accountability that follows from making the call. When you place those 3 words together, you have described the most fundamental governance design intervention available. One person, one decision category, one accountability. This is not a committee. It is not a structural change. It is a person, an individual designated by name with the explicit mandate to make a specific class of decisions and the accountability that follows from making them. Organizations that install this design stop revisiting decisions they've already made. Their governance begins to hold the way it was always intended to, and their leaders are free to direct their energy toward what the organization is building rather than relitigating what it has already decided. Designated decision owner begins with a mapping exercise. For each major decision category in your AI governance structure, model deployment, data access, risk threshold approval, policy finalization, you ask the following question. Who is the designated decision owner? Not who is consulted, not who reviews, who decides. If the answer is a team, a committee, or a phrase like leadership consensus, diffused ownership is present. The design response is to name a person, define the decision scope explicitly, and make that designation visible to everyone who interacts with that decision category. In practice, this may invite resistance. Designating a name for decision authority makes accountability concrete. It removes the ambiguity that allows everyone to feel included and no one to be responsible. Some executives may resist this not because they oppose accountability, but because the ambiguity has been protective for them and for the organization's sense of harmony. The work here is not to force clarity where the culture is not ready for it. It is to help the organization see what diffused ownership is actually taking from the organization, not in theory, but in specific decisions that have stalled, reversed, or not held in the past 12 months. When that becomes visible, the case for designated decision owner makes itself. Once designated authorities are in place, the next question emerges naturally. What happens when a decision exceeds the authority of the designated person? That question is answered in letter 15. Because designating and assigning a name is the beginning of the structure, not its completion. For now, the design task is clear. Walk the decision structure of your AI governance system. Find the categories where no single person is designated. Name them. Document the scope. Communicate the designation. Organizations that complete this work are not just addressing a gap, they are building the foundation on which everything that follows will either stand or hold. Everything else in this stage depends on this being in place first. Nothing that follows holds without it. Well-designed governance does not announce itself, like the arrangement of parts beneath any structure that holds. The intervals, the timing, each element in its right place, it is not what people notice first. What they notice is whether the whole thing holds together, the way an orchestra holds together. Not because every instrument plays the same note, but because each one knows its place and its moment. That coherence begins here, with the clarity of who decides. To review, the pattern we addressed in this letter is diffused ownership, which resolves to designated decision owner. In letter 15, we will speak about authority vacuum, which resolves to clear authority mandate. Thank you.